So most of you that have seen me talk are probably used to me talking about things like this, the variety of organisms that are in the Puerto Rican stream community. There are several, all of these on the picture are actually migratory, which means they're relying on moving from streams down to the ocean and then back to streams to complete their life cycle. But as you can imagine, these streams aren't completely free of barriers. There are things in the way of these guys moving around. And one of the main issues that blocking their movement are dams. And so we know dams provide us a lot of benefits. We get a continuous water supply because it's creating reservoirs behind them. There's recreation areas created, and there's also hydropower in some cases. But we also have to think about the costs of having these dams in the ecosystem and how they're impacting the environment there. So this is sort of the focus of my dissertation, and because I was thinking about these questions, I figured it would be necessary to sort of look at the water management side of water in Puerto Rico. And so I took Laura German's Institutional Dimensions of Sustainability and started thinking about these questions and thinking about which agents are involved in water management and who has the responsibility for managing water within Puerto Rico. And as I started fleshing this out, I realized there are actually several players and several different agencies that are involved in different aspects of water management. We have at the federal level, there's the EPA because it is a territory of the US. EPA does have some say. And my site particularly is in the national forest on the island. So the US Forest Service does have some say in how water is managed as well. And then also at the state level, there's the Water Utility Company, which has a very long name. And then there's also the Department of Natural Resources, which also has a say in how water is managed. And then this Junta de Calidad Ambiental, which is sort of a branch of EPA that's located in Puerto Rico. So as I started thinking about these agencies, I realized I wasn't really sure how they were interacting and if they play nice together or not. So I started thinking that maybe it would be beneficial to do my internship in Puerto Rico. And so this past summer, I did my internship with the Department of Natural Resources. And I started talking about them, and I was excited to go down there and maybe meet the whole office of the water planning office, which is mostly women, and then also perhaps getting to go out into the streams and see some of these cool organisms and also having my ID as well. But as I started packing for this trip, I thought I was going to go down and help them develop a drought monitoring tool, also translate it to English as well. But as I started packing, there started to be things like this in the news, where I noticed that where I was going, there's water being shut off. And it didn't get better as I stayed. They actually started at the worst. They were shutting off water for 3 days to San Juan, which you can see is very large. Thousands of people were not having access to water for 3 days and then water again. And this was all because there was this major drought sweeping through the island. So this is an image from July 28th, and you can see the bright red is classified as extreme drought. So it was very bright, very red, and just no water. All these reservoirs were drying up. So it was actually quite an opportune time to be down there and thinking about water management issues. And so because I was working with the Department of Natural Resources, I got to participate in the Scientific Drought Committee. It was made up of these different agencies, which some of them may look familiar to you. We have AEE is the power company on the island, and so they do have hydropower dams. So again, they have a say in how the water is being managed. And also they had the National Weather Service, all of these different scientific communities coming together and talking about what are we going to do about this drought. They would meet weekly and they would come up with suggestions to give to the governor of Puerto Rico to decide how we're going to manage this drought effectively. And as you can imagine, a lot of it was men, but it was actually a pretty social time, and I got to present and talk about what we were seeing in the reservoirs. So things like this, people would send in pictures where you could actually see the shore becoming more exposed, water levels going down. There was rulers showing how far the water level is dropping, and then this as well. You can see how this should be a river, but it's just so dry. So being down there and actually seeing all this happen, we started giving suggestions as to how we could sort of manage the water better. Maybe we could fix leaks within the system. Maybe we could encourage people to use less water. But all of these things were kind of expensive. And so another thing that also happened while I was down there is they started talking about how bad Puerto Rico's debt is. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's been a huge issue in the news lately. And they actually have defaulted on a couple of major bond loans. And if you actually start looking at the debt in Puerto Rico, it is really huge. On a per person basis, it's much larger than any of the other states. And it actually has a larger debt. It's like $72 billion in debt, higher than, it's only second to New York and California, but it has a population the size of Oklahoma. So it's a huge debt problem, and there's also no water. So sort of thinking about how these questions are going to inform my research and how I can make better suggestions as I start thinking about management practices. So basically, in conclusion, and then also they decided with all the suggestions we gave them, they were gonna do cloud seeding, which is totally crazy and cost them a lot of money, and there's no evidence it works. So in conclusion, I'm still not really sure who has the authority, and also sort of thinking about what I learned this summer and taking that and knowing more about the economy as to how I can make better recommendations in the future. So thank you.